Hello and welcome to Media Musings. Uh, you know, Welcome to anyone who is lurking in the chat and or watching in the future. Today we are closing off our discussion on the Disney Renaissance with an example of the late Disney Renaissance, and depending on how you figure things, the first movie of the late Disney Renaissance, Hercules.
So yeah, this one is very much my choice.
Who'd have guessed?
Who'd have thunk?
Yeah.
Yeah. A movie I remember very fondly and still enjoy. Got to say right from the off, it's a Disney flick. We're not checking it for accuracy.
Yeah. Now,
authenticity maybe, but not accuracy.
And if you want to get more into that distinction, either watch OSP's video on Assassin's Creed or stay tuned next week.
OSP honest. Is there an OSP video I haven't seen?
Yeah, it's one of their hour-long detailed diatribes where they go over the Assassin's Creed series and the difference between authenticity and accuracy, using the Assassin's Creed games as a lens.
Oh, that'll be why I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love OSP, but I don't have an hour to sit and watch Blue and Red play a video game.
It's one of their ones where there's a prepared slideshow and you listen to it. So yeah.
I have to go dig that out. It sounds like it could be interesting and useful for next week.
Yeah, and there's a couple on Superman, like one about why Superman works as an archetype and a character, and then one on all the attempts to satirize Superman and why evil Supermans don't really tend to work out as good allegories.
Sounds like right up OSB's alley. It doesn't sound like anything out of the ordinary for them. Yeah. I have to go dig those out. I tend to I spend a lot of time watching Blues History Maker videos.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah. Hercules.
Now,
not an accurate depiction of the mythology at all. Any preconceived notions you have of the mythology, leave them at the door.
Yeah.
It's a kid's flick, first and foremost.
Though there are some very pretty funny, like, first year classic students level jokes in there.
Yeah. There's some jokes there that are definitely for those who are familiar with the mythology. And there's some intelligent examples of certain things they do when they look at things like Greek drama.
Yeah.
But broadly, Meg was never attacked by a centaur. That was Hercules' second wife, Hercules, if you want to call him that. He was not the son of Zeus and Hera. He was not... he didn't have his mortality stolen from him by Hades. Hades wasn't evil, and I have an entire rant on that. Stay tuned. Panic and pain. I don't know where they came from. I feel like that they came from the same kind of black hole of imagination that, I don't know, like the talking heads on the Harry Potter bus in the third film came from. Like, I can't think of anything that there may be.
I mean, possibly taking the children of Ares, Phobos, and Deimos, but syncretizing them as demons.
Yeah, which is weird. But
there's a lot of Christian syncretization in order to make it palatable to an audience, which actually didn't really work, or at least not the American fundagelical audience.
No. And just to point out, the ancient Greeks didn't kneel in the middle of a temple with their hands crossed praying to Zeus. That's not how that worked.
Yeah.
Just putting that out there. But yeah, all that aside, and I'm sure we'll get into bits and pieces of it, I like this movie because it's fun.
Yeah.
I like this movie because it takes just enough of the ancient myth that it's not a bad adaptation, because the thing about the ancient myths is they're alive. As with all mythos, they're alive. They develop. And me personally, and you'll hear me talk about more next week, for me, this movie, the Percy Jackson novels, some of the real, even the bad stuff, is as much a part of the living mythos of ancient Greece as Orpheus Rex, as the Iliad, the Odyssey.
And if you want to burn down my comics or my comment section for that, feel free to. I could really use the engagement.
Yeah. But you've got to understand, we've always said I'm a classicist. I studied a master's in classics. I'm not a traditional classicist. I studied classical reception. And classical reception is largely how we view the classics in modernity through the lens of cinema, music, TV, you know, all these things. Even down to, I remember one lecture slide on where you've seen Hermes or where you've seen Mercury. A clue, every fucking where. The only place, like, every fucking where. He's everywhere. He's everywhere. There was even an American stamp with him on it at one point.
Yeah.
He's just, he's just everywhere.
And I mean, arguably, you could say Shazam is all, you know, classical reception, with the exception of the one Jewish king who bought his way into the name.
I mean,
so sneak peek for March. It's an acronym, stands for the wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, the power of Atlas, or no, that's the stamina of Atlas, the power of Zeus, the courage of Achilles, and the speed of Mercury.
The courage of Achilles.
Yeah.
I have opinions on that. Achilles was a lot of things, brave, not necessarily one of them.
I may be mixing that up. Like, this is just off the top of my head, but we will be I'm sure we'll be getting into that when we cover Shazam.
Right. Okay, anyway, Hercules.
Yeah. And unlike Noodle here, this was actually the first time I saw it, because I grew up Fundy.
Yes. So now do you understand why I said, like, Lion King has the best score, but this has the best soundtrack?
I'd say as a unified whole.
Yeah.
I'd say as a unified whole, the most of the songs fit together as a better, but I honestly, the Lion King's a little less, is a bit less up and down, in my opinion, when it comes to the quality of the songs.
Yeah, like the lyricism of the songs is severely lacking.
Yeah.
But the tune and the beat and, you know, the actual performance of the songs is
Yeah, like any of the songs that feature the muses, I'd say that's about Lion King quality.
Yeah, definitely.
But the training and Go the Distance, I'd say that's that's lower end of Lion King quality. But
Go the Distance makes me cry, so you don't get to badmouth Go the Distance.
but the training song is like no.
The training song is I think it is deliberate though, because it's Phil singing it. It's meant to be that way out. And then you've got Meg's song, which again, the muses, the chorus, these are supposed to be the living embodiment of the arts. Yeah. Of course, nothing else in the movie is going to come close to touching their quality.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, that's just a given. But seeing as we were talking about why you've never seen this film before, I've just poured myself a drink because I'm thirsty, so come on.
Yeah.
This, for those watching, is so much gin and tonic, so much gin, so much tonic.
Yeah.
Because I set down a challenge.
Yeah.
Ring sent me the link to Focus on the Family.
Yep. Focus on the Family's review of Hercules via their plugged in review. I think at the time it would have been a magazine, but now it's their website that it's basically Focus on the Family's. Here's what's okay for good Christian people to show their kids.
Yes. But I did lay down the thing of I will down a double shot of gin if anyone's able to read this on stream without smirking, mocking, or outright laughing. Now, I did originally say neat gin, but neat gin is like paint stripper, folks. If you want another word out of me on this stream, it had to have been just a little bit of tonic on top. Yeah. So, Ring knows the thing. If Ring can read this without giggling, I will down that glass on stream. I'll probably spill it, but I will down it.
Yeah.
And we'll see how this goes.
Okay. In fact, Herc ultimately declines immortality in order to remain on Earth with his woman. A noble act, but a disquieting example.
You're not supposed to be mocking.
I feel that patronizing tone is supposed to be in the article. I'm trying to read it authentically.
Okay, from the top.
Yeah. In fact, Herc ultimately declines immortality in order to remain on Earth with his woman. A noble act, but a disquieting example for young Christians tempted to choose between holiness and hormones. Furthermore, wiggling hips and allusions to Meg's other Aphroditic claims seem a bit immodest.
Damn it. Oh, well. Cheers. And it's charms, not claims.
Cheers.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to be more than one mouthful because that's a lot.
Yeah.
I need to add more tonic to that. That's strong.
Yeah.
I will finish it, but I'm just topping it off with some tonic.
But when it comes to this period of the Disney Renaissance, the fundagelical culture of fundagelical culture in America has kind of had it with Disney. Like of the last half of the Disney Renaissance, the only one so everything post Lion King and to Tarzan, the only one I actually saw with my parents for explicit okay was Tarzan, which we went and saw in theaters.
Of course, you went to see Colonialism, the movie, in theaters.
Pocahontas was banned because new agey and it didn't teach the history right.
I mean, it didn't, but why would white Americans care?
Because it didn't teach the Pocahontas became a Christian story.
That's not what I meant by when I said it didn't.
Like, it didn't teach their version of the right story.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to finish that in a sec because wow.
And of course, you'll probably need it because of this list of diatribes that Hunchback was.
I tried.
Yeah, Hunchback was banned because it criticized the church, which being Protestant wouldn't be so much of a big deal because it criticized the Catholic Church. But there was also, the whole, the gargoyles are demons thing.
But it also criticized the orthodoxy of the Catholic Church, which is what the Puritans mostly took with them.
Yeah. And, and there were, and they had, problems with Esmeralda because, of course, they did. I'm talking about the fundagelicals as a whole. The reason I was given growing up was, the criticizing the church and the gargoyles being demons. Those two I haven't, I've never seen the whole way through. And of course, Hercules was banned in our household because it was pagan.
I mean, only a little bit.
Yeah.
It had pagan aesthetics, but we'll get on to that.
And then I'm pretty sure the only reason we got to see Mulan is because one of our babysitters had it and, put it in for us. Like, Mulan would have been banned in our house, would have probably been banned in our house hadn't we seen it already.
Okay, but why would it have been banned?
Chinese ghosts. The whole ancestors thing.
Isn't that the same reason they gave for the Lion King?
No, that was the same reason the fundies crazier than us gave for the Lion King. In Mulan, it's a lot more explicit.
It's not that bad. It's not that much worse.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're gonna have to forgive me. I've just been hit with what was probably more like 2 doubles than a 1 double of gin. Anyone interested? This is what I'm drinking. It's nice. Don't try and down it. It's like paint stripper all in one go.
So yeah, two doubles of gin and a triple of fundy crazy.
Yeah. That's enough to turn anyone's head, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So. See?
Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about this. As we're talking about religion.
Yeah.
We're going to have to address the elephant in the room. This movie is not, and I say this as a Roman/Hellenic polytheist, I don't care which you call me. I use the Greek names for some gods and the Roman ones for others, and I worship some uniquely Roman gods. But yeah, so I use Roman, but if you want to call me Hellenic, you're not so far wrong that I'm going to be offended.
I'll split the difference and just say classical.
Yes, well, classical Mediterranean.
Yeah.
We can't just say that the Mediterranean was the only part of the earth that existed, because Egypt already had indoor plumbing by this point.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's the region that's referred to as the classical world.
Oh, I wish you'd have told me you were going to say that before we started the stream. I'd have told you not to.
I mean, to be fair, I wasn't planning on it.
Yeah, no, that's the layman's term.
Yeah.
Most academics have accepted that to only mean the Mediterranean when you discuss the classical world is at best ignorant and at worst has shades of like racial supremacy.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be really gentle in saying that because I know you didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
But folks, if you're ever talking about the ancient world, and you're talking, especially, even if you are talking about Greece and Italy, please don't call Greece and Italy the completion of the classical world, because you had Persia and you had Egypt, and there were other things going on, and you
And
had the Islamic Empire and the Chinese further out,
and like Rome,
yeah,
Rome had trade with China. It wasn't direct trade with China, but it was trade with China.
I mean, it was trade via the Mongols, so it wasn't. They knew, like, the Romans were wearing Chinese silk brocade and the Chinese were eating Roman fish sauce. That's a thing. A lot of people don't like that, but that's how things were.
Yeah.
You can tell I've had a triple gin and tonic.
Are you sure it wasn't the fundy that's doing it?
Little both. We'll decide later.
Yeah.
We'll decide on the rewatch.
But anyways.
But yeah, this is not in any way, shape, or form pagan. Yeah. There's a lot of Christian elements to it. Dear Hercules, you would not have walked into the temple of Zeus and prayed directly to Zeus without a priest, and you would not have shown up at the temple of Zeus without an offering. Let's put that out there. If you were going to say a prayer like that, you'd have gone to your Lararium. But then again, I'm Roman. I don't know if the Greeks had them. But that's not a prayer you would have gone to the temple for. Although I do like... Okay, so in ancient Greece and in Rome as well, the statue was the god.
Yeah.
This is where the biblical worship of false idols comes from. The idea that polytheists be outside of Christian tradition. And I say Christian because I am not discussing Judaism with a barge pole, because that's not my wheelhouse. Research that yourself.
But Judeo-Christian is a bit of a dog whistle.
Yes, we've now learned that, so we're not going to use it anymore. Apologies if I've ever used it in the past. I'm sure I have. Now I know better.
Yeah.
And I do seriously mean that. I know it sounds flippant because I can hear it in my tone, but I don't. I do mean that. But the way the statue comes to life is, I think, the most authentic moment for polytheism in this movie. The statue is Zeus. And that kind of is how... So, like, in Athens, they have the temple to Athena, the Temple of Athens. There would have been a giant, and when I say giant, I'm talking tens of feet, statue of Athena. And that statue, yes, was representative of Athena and was something for them to focus on while worshipping Athena, but also was Athena. I can't think of a Christian... In the same way, again, sorry, Protestants, you're going to have to just deal. But in the same way in Catholicism, the Trinity is all separate, but is also God. In the same way in Hellenic polytheism, the statues are statues, but are also the gods. It's double think. It's really hard. Just the statues were the gods, and just accept that as given. The statues were treated with all the awe and wonder and worship of literal gods, and like during certain festivals, statues of the gods would be taken from the temples and paraded around the streets like as if they were the gods.
Now to now to badly syncretize, but hopefully make a useful analogy. I guess that this would be it'd be kind of the way that most charismatic Protestants would view the Holy Spirit as the modern interface for the connection between the human and the divine.
I don't know enough about Protestantism to say that.
Yeah.
You've done this on purpose. You've
got
me drunk on purpose.
I asked you if you wanted to do it at the beginning or at the end, and you chose the beginning.
Yeah, but stop playing with the logic. Okay, I will say I am feeling a little drunk, but not as drunk as I'm coming across, because I'm good at that. But yes, okay, so yeah, this is not. If you're looking for examples of how Hellenic polytheism works, they say in it, folks.
Yeah.
You would not walk into a temple and just no. The idea of coming to a temple without an offering to me is like, it's just so weird to me.
Also, that scene is animated very much like up until the point where the statue comes alive. It's very
Christian.
Yeah, it's very much the troubled hero walking into a cathedral to lay out their burdens.
Yeah. And I will say, right, the ancient Greek temples were fucking epic.
Yeah.
Like, they were designed for the glory of the gods, and like the architects definitely, like, they passed the assignment.
Yeah.
Like they understood the assignment there.
Yeah.
So there's that. Now it's interesting because I passed the comment right at the start of this film of when we were watching earlier, and I said, let's play a drinking game. I'm not drinking. No, done that. But let's play a drinking game. Every time something blatantly not from Greek myth, any Greek myth, is called the gospel truth, drink.
And I think there was about 4.
I counted 6. But I may have missed some. But there, I think in the whole movie, I only counted once where they said it's the truth, and what they were saying was actually from the law.
Well, that's weird because like from the time you said that, there had already been 3.
Yes.
After that, I only heard that phrase like one more time.
You hear it again during the Meg song. They say it during the Meg, the love song. I won't say I'm in love. And that's the only time it's accurate. During the Zero to Hero, you hear it. But again, that's almost the Zero to Hero. It's not that it's inaccurate. It's that the numbers are a bit off.
Yeah.
Because they say he's a perfect 10 for 10. There were 12 labors of Hercules. That's me being nitpicky though. Like that's just really nitpicky.
Well, to be even equally picky, 2 of them didn't count. That's why they're 12.
Yeah, valid. Yeah, valid. Okay, so 2 out of 6 ain't bad.
Yeah.
2 out of 7, yeah. But yeah, it did become like, by sort of 20 minutes into this film, the chorus saying that's the gospel truth is your cue to go Google that shit.
Yeah.
But yeah. Especially when they're talking about Hades, who has been done dirty by this movie, like really dirty. Like,
hold on,
Noodle would be having a hissy fit, except Noodle's not sure Noodle can do the words. Dirty. Like, Hades was done dirty. Okay, Hades is not. It obviously depends on which mythology you look at, because myths change over time, they evolve. Hades was not evil. The correlation between embodying death and being evil, or embodying an afterlife or an underworld and being evil, is a fundamentally Christian idea.
Yeah.
I don't even think Jews have a concept of death, and I have a concept of hell. And if Muslims do, it's very different. So far as I know, I might be wrong. But like, even the Abrahamic religions, that's a very Abrahamic idea, that the embodiment of death is evil. No, he's not. Death is a part of life, all like, a cycle.
You know, an all benevolent sky deity versus an all malevolent chthonic deity is a very Christian concept.
Yeah, it is. And although I will say the actual depiction,
we're
not saying Disney had to be accurate.
Yeah, we did cover accuracy versus authenticity in a little bit of detail earlier in the stream, and we will cover it in very much greater detail next week when we do our primer of classical reception. But
yeah,
TLDR, accuracy is what's right in the head, authenticity is what's right in the feels.
Pretty much. So for a broadly Christian worldview audience, this Hades is evil, Hades is the devil tracks. It feels right. When you've been raised in a Christian worldview, that feels right.
Yeah.
But especially for a film that is so trying so hard to claim that it's not Christian.
Yeah.
While still like pandering to Christians. And is making plot decisions that are very much not Christian. You know, if a Christian deity chose to live on earth with the love of his life, I think, you know, questions would be being asked.
Yeah.
It feels authentic to a Christian audience. The problem is, with the best will in the world, not everyone who sees this movie is going to be Christian. And this is something media does, and you'll hear me talk about it a lot next month. When media tries to present like ancient Greek Hellenic polytheism, not Hellenism, Hellenism is the entire culture, not just the religion, but Hellenic polytheism or Roman polytheism, they have this nasty habit of just making it Christianity in a funny hat. And the thing is, it's not Christianity in a funny hat. It's an entirely separate beast. It's not go to the temple and pray and the statue will answer you. That's not how that works in ancient polytheism. The lack of priests in the area, the lack of offerings being presented. There's a lot of things that are left out in order to make it more palatable to a Christian audience. And this film is fundamentally aimed at Americans. I mean, come on, Thebes is New York City. That's not even subtle.
Yeah.
So I can understand why they did that. But it really grinds my gears because death, Hades is the personification of death. It's a problem that Christian worldviews have, in that death is viewed as evil. Death is not in and of itself an evil thing. It's part of the cycle of life.
Yeah.
It's how you die, and the mechanisms around that can potentially be a problem or be nerve-wracking. And people do fear death, but that doesn't necessarily mean that death itself is bad. Death just exists. Death is completely morally neutral. And Hades, especially in the mythology, is broadly, he's a rules lawyer. He's very much a rules lawyer. He's that D&D player who's like lawful neutral, but wants to know the exact wording of your DM's ruling because he will find a way around it. He's also that irritating DM who knows exactly what you're planning and has planned for it. See, obvious. He's very much he's a rules lawyer. He's not as presented in this movie, but again, Disney movie, kids movie, it needs an evil villain. Death's right there in a Christian worldview. Let's not think too hard about it. It is one of those things. It winds me up because the movie had the opportunity to break that paradigm, that very troubling paradigm of teaching kids to fear death. And it didn't. And instead it leaned into it because it was easy and it was a cheap laugh.
And also, well, and that is a thing about the middle and later Disney Renaissance, in that they were, I say this as someone who recently, and who just a couple minutes ago admitted to have not seen most of the latter Disney Renaissance, but they, where Disney was working at subverting and you can see this in The Lion King as well, where they're working at subverting parts of their formula while upholding other parts and seeing what works.
Yeah, very much so.
Like, for instance, the opening of Hercules is very much a subversion of the traditional Disney opening.
Oh yeah, no, it's very much, the only thing missing is the book opening.
Yeah,
it's there. It's beauty in the beat.
Yeah, it starts out like a very traditional Disney opening, and then the Muses say, "Nope, we're telling this story," and break the fourth wall.
Yeah. And again, the Muses as the chorus, that's exactly what the chorus was for in ancient Greek drama. The chorus broke the fourth wall. The chorus broadly didn't interact with the players in ancient Greek drama. It's like, you'll notice in this movie, the chorus will say things, and the only person who seems to hear them is Meg.
Yeah.
And just for that one little bit of when she's singing her song. But other than that, the way the chorus
arguably
is very, yeah.
I mean, arguably, she's not. It's less. She's hearing the music. She's hearing the chorus / the Muses, and more they're elucidating her own inner thoughts.
Yeah, and the whole point is with that scene with Meg is not that she's joining in with the chorus; it's that the chorus is joining in with her. And she's saying her thoughts out loud and almost soliloquizing. Did I pronounce it soliloquizing? Yes.
Yeah, soliloquizing.
Yes, I did. I've always had trouble with that word, even when I was sober. But yeah, so that's almost what she's doing, and the chorus is joining in, and that's very reminiscent. That's more Shakespeare than Greek, because characters didn't really soliloquize in ancient Greek dramas. You'll notice if you ever read them, see them performed. But the chorus do, and the chorus. This was Shakespeare's great leap forward in the literary sense, if you like. he went from having a separate chorus off to the side who fill in the audience on what's going on in the background to having characters stand on stage and give a soliloquy.
Yeah.
He removed the chorus from that and gave that job to the characters themselves. And he was the pioneer of that idea. But before him, the chorus was there to tell the audience what the hell was going on because they had no clue.
I wouldn't call him I wouldn't call him exactly the first one to do it, because his contemporaries did it as well.
Yes, but his contemporaries did it because they saw how successful he was doing it.
I mean, arguably, like, I'm pretty sure Marlowe was an earlier contemporary, and Marlowe did it in Dr. Faustus. I mean, Shakespeare used it to the best effect, and he's the most known for it. You can't just say it was his invention, is my point.
Yeah. It's one of those things to, and there's always the theory that people think Marlowe was Shakespeare. No, two totally different writing styles. But yeah, I mean, they were all doing it around the same time. It was really Shakespeare being so prolific that really popularized it. As to who did it, whose performance got put on first,
yeah,
that's a little bit
wibbly
wobbly. Yeah. It would be hard to put that in a timeline, but if you've seen something that says Marlowe did it first, then I'm willing to go with that.
Well, I'm not going so far as to say Marlowe did it first, but I'm going to say, I'm saying we can't really make a call as to who did it first.
Yeah. Of the two of them, I mean, I would probably, like, Shakespeare definitely made a lot of use of this. Like, every single Shakespeare play's got at least one soliloquy. And if you don't understand the soliloquy, you don't understand what the fuck's going on in the play. So very much in that sense, it's leaning on that Shakespearean Elizabethan style of drama. Which in itself is leaning on the ancient Greek style that predated it. We can definitely say the ancient Greeks came before Shakespeare.
Yes.
We can definitely say that.
Yes, we can definitely say that. But I mean, that is kind of what Disney's Hercules really is a mishmash of themes built on traditions that were started from Greece.
Yeah, Disney's ancient. This is why I said right at the start, like, you can nitpick this film for accuracy, and why when I said I'm being nitpicky, I said it with a bit of a smirk, because, and why this film is part of the canon of classical reception is because if the ancient Greeks had an unbroken culture to modernity and were still putting on plays of Hercules, it would probably look a lot like this movie.
Yeah.
Like, it would have developed in that way. It would have absorbed Shakespeare and fed it back. It would have absorbed Christianity and fed it back. And the myths would have evolved through time. Now, that's you can argue that in the comments if you want. But let's be clear here. The Disney is not breaking away from the tradition of the ancient Greek myths. It's continuing it, and it's part of that tradition. And that's a really important distinction to make, because what you don't want to be doing is saying, oh, it's fake or it's wrong or it's inaccurate, because it's not. You cannot have an quote unquote accurate myth.
Yeah.
A myth is fundamentally a story. It's not true. It has truths within it, but it's not a true story.
Yeah.
And, you know, the line between history, myth, and legend can get quite blurred sometimes. But when you start getting precious about which ancient Greek god did the thing at the time, you're probably in the wrong arena for that. You know, it's one of those things. It's some people enjoy it, but I tend to find, and what I've found is, you know, researching for next month, is it is more interesting to ask why did they tell this story this way than to say that's wrong.
Yeah.
Get a better discussion that way. One thing I do want to point out, Pain and Panic. Pain and Panic are these two little evil henchmen.
Well, they're actually explicitly called imps in the movie.
Yeah, okay.
So we could call them imps or demons because an imp is a subcategory of demon.
Yes, and again, as the Protestant in the room, you would know that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because my education never discussed anything like that, weirdly. But yeah, so I want to talk about panic.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the mythical basis for a non-human entity that embodies panic.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they are imps, they are demons, and therefore, what we can take from that is that the Christian worldview says anything that isn't God is a demon, is the devil, is evil, is wrong. You know, what's the line? Thou shalt worship no other gods, therefore no other gods must or can be allowed to exist.
Yeah.
Panic, as shown here, like there is a Greek deity of panic.
Yeah.
You have Pan in the Roman, syncretized to Dionysus. That madness that comes from being too drunk, the madness that comes from being in a panic, and there are entire cults around it and things. Not a chthonic deity.
Yeah.
So you're 3 for 3, Disney, strike out. But from a Christian worldview, very much, this must be a demon because it makes people do evil, violent things. It makes people lose their minds.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's a demon, it's an imp, and we can use it. Like, this Hercules is very much ancient Greece through a Christian lens.
Or as I theorized before the stream, like they probably like if, and I, you know what, I'll go so far as to say they probably did this because given the first year classical studies jokes that are sprinkled so liberally throughout the movie.
Yes.
They probably had some people with a classics background working on writing this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I read somewhere that the artists even visited Greece to get a look at some of the architecture and stuff.
Yeah, so I'd say it'd be fair to say that they probably took the idea of Phobos and Deimos, you know, the sons of Ares, the bad stuff that comes with war, and used them as the basis for Pain and Panic.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that, see, as we're talking about this, the fates, the way the fates are presented. I'm not going to try and say the Greek word. I'm not going to try and say the Greek word. Yes, I'm going to try and say the Greek word. Eumenides? Eumenides?
Euripides?
Eumenides. You don't know that name, folks? Google it.
Yeah.
Man walks into a tailor shop and holding up a pair of ripped trousers. Eumenides? Yes, yeah. Euripides. So yeah, they were, again, in the ancient Greek culture, they were the living embodiment of vengeance and justice.
Yeah.
They were the jury, if you like, on trials.
I'm not.
That's a very, very loose.
I think you have the Fates mixed up with the Furies in your not quite so sober state.
Sorry, I'm saying Fates. I actually mean Furies because these are more the Furies than the Fates.
Yeah.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm going to explain.
Okay.
So they are presented as the Fates, but aesthetically, they are far more akin to the Furies. And in their characterization, they are far more akin to the Furies. They are vengeance. They take almost vindictive pleasure in cutting the threads, which again was the Fates, but everything about them screams Furies, except for the fact that they're called Fates and that they handle the threads.
And the shared eye thing.
Yeah. And again, that's the kind of mistake someone makes who has a Christian worldview and thinks group of three women with power over life and death. Smush. Like, that's exactly the kind of mistake that happens.
Also,
when people try and
that, or they're once again dipping back into a more Elizabethan tradition and wanted to portray them more as crones a la Macbeth.
I mean, yes, there's definitely that's not even subtle. That's there right from the off.
Yeah.
But again, the crones from Macbeth are part of that history of witchcraft and vengeful women that goes all the way back to the Fates and the Furies. So it's kind of it's powering its own cyclical nature. So it's kind of it's taking from, but is also feeding into this growth and this change. And it is an important distinction between the Fates and the Furies. But again, Disney flick, what are you going to do? Like, most people are not going to remember this movie by the time they're in adulthood anyway. Very rare they're going to actually rewatch it. So is it strictly necessary to be that persnickety about it? Probably not. The main reason I'm bringing it up is not because I'm having a dig at that they smushed it and took the aesthetic and the thing and did that. It's to point out that this is how reception develops. This is how myths grow and change and evolve over time. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it really is a case of I'm pointing these things out not to have a dig at the inaccuracy or not to have a dig at them doing that, but to explain how that thought process feeds into the development of a mythology.
Yeah.
I'm basically priming you for the primer next week.
And and well, also like if I mean Hercules is very much a muddle of themes that I very much got the sense that it didn't quite know what movie it wanted to be.
I think Hercules is as close to a Passion of Christ movie as Disney's ever going to get.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, we're probably going to get to the Christ bit a bit later. I'm putting a pin in that.
Yes, I thought you might be somehow.
But I'd argue, in a way, it doesn't want to be. There's another movie that it wants to be.
Go on.
a strange infant falls from the sky and is found by a farming couple who then has to learn how to control his great strength. So he moves to the big city and starts protecting the people. What does this sound like?
Yeah, it's Superman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in a way, it felt like Disney wanted to make a move, like a contemplation of what it means, what does it mean to be heroic type of movie.
Yeah.
Like, as one of the themes that got all muddled together in the tangled mess that Disney wove.
Yeah, and I mean the thing with that is as well, this movie came in 1997. America was grappling with what the question of true heroism is in 1997. Like, post Desert Storm, post Vietnam, pre 9/11. America is at its peak internationally. Like, America is the unquestioned top of the totem pole, like, United States of the world.
Yeah.
Like, even more so than now, because people question and have a problem with it now. Whereas in 1997, it was just understood that, of course, America's better than the rest of the world. It's America. And we didn't have internet to see each other on social media and see what it was really like. We did, but we had dial-up and AOL forums. So America's grappling with that question. This movie's grappling. You've got decades by this point of Superman. I'm sure Ring is going to jump in any moment now and tell me the dates for when Superman first started and progressed.
Well, I mean,
hint.
Well, so Superman as a comic book started in 1930s. He is very much the prototypical superpowered superhero. For the non-powered street level hero, you'd say Batman is probably more, Batman or Dick Tracy is more prototypical of that. But Superman is the example of the superhero and has a tradition going back, to the 1930s. And then on the big screen, we had Superman, like through Superman 3, like in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah. So yeah, you've got this long tradition of America fighting its wars in the comic books and on the silver screen. You've got this long tradition of America really allegorizing itself on screen.
Yeah.
And using heroes and villains as a commentary on what's going on in American society. Disney's not immune to that.
Oh, Disney is far from immune to that. Like Donald Duck has official discharge papers from the Navy.
Yeah, like this is very much it's a thing. So I don't think for a second that this film is an accident in how, you get songs like Go the Distance.
Yeah.
And this concept of a true hero. It's a time in history where America is really grappling with those questions of what is it to be at the top of the world? What is it to be a world leader?
Yeah.
What makes us, like, this is 6 or 7 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
Cold War officially ends in 93. This is 97.
Yeah, June 9th.
Animated movies take at least 2 years to produce. So this was realistically being written right as the Cold War was being wrapped up.
Yeah.
And you can tell.
Yeah.
Like, from a point of view of this is a commentary of America by America, you can tell this is very much contemporary to the end of the Cold War and America having to grapple with that question of, we won, now what?
Yeah.
Um,
oh wow.
What?
So you know how I have these random, profound, possibly stupid thoughts as you say something.
Yeah.
So America is trying to find its identity. America is trying to seek its right to join amongst the great, to
Yes.
be recognized amongst the great, powers of the history and their progenitor.
Yes.
America is Rome.
Yes. America is Hercules. Yes.
Yes.
All ties in. More discussion next week. Come back and speak to us then. But yeah, this true hero. This. The thing with Disney movies is it has this habit of teaching kids a history without them realizing they're learning a history.
Yeah.
It's like you said it last week. Like everyone has that moment of reading Hamlet and going, "This is the Lion King."
Yeah.
Or you do if you've ever read Hamlet. And it's yeah, I skimmed over it this week. I see the point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then within that, this film is very American. Like, it's so American, it's not Greek anymore.
Yeah.
The aesthetic of the temples might be Greek, but it's not Greek. It's like, okay, there's a Peloponnesian, like, they take very American things and they give them a veneer of Greek.
Well,
In much the same way they did with the religion. They take Christian things, give them a veneer of the classic.
And I think partially this was because of the the people who are writing the script learned of the connection between athletes and Greek heroes, and thus there were writers who wanted to make a sports culture allegory because it was all over the place in the 90s.
Yeah, and I mean, again, this is on the back of the famous Cold War Olympics that became something akin to a cultural proxy war.
Well, and I mean the sandals are a clear reference to Air Jordans.
Yeah, you've got Air Jordans in there. You've got Meg talking about a Peloponnesian minute, which is a New York minute. You've got the best thing since they put the hole in pita, best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very, Thebes is the big olive.
Yeah.
That's not even subtle, Phil.
Yeah.
Like, and the merch culture that grows up around Hercules is very American.
Yeah. I'm an action figure.
Yeah. So I remember watching that as a kid and being like, is that what Americans do to their heroes? Like, even now, like, we get British people do something amazing at the Olympics and they get like a post box with their name on it. They don't get an action figure. That's very American. That's very American. And yet at other points in this film there are certain things they do that are very like the jokes are in there. I've got 2 words for you. I am retired. That's a Greek joke, by the way, folks. If you say those words in Greek, it's 2 words, not 3.
The Trojans bet on the wrong horse.
Yeah, the Trojans bet on the wrong horse. There's even with Meg of he made me an offer I had to refuse, she says, and then knocks the chessboard. That's classic Godfather. That's the Godfather that's a reference to. Even the joke about on every vase, on every vase, that's a joke of that's a pronunciation joke of British versus American.
Yeah.
And this whole thing of it is when we take the America as Hercules, as we must, because that's now stuck in my head.
Yeah.
Zeus
You're
is your
welcome.
father. Why is that funny? Why is it funny that Zeus is the young Hercules' father? It's funny because this kid, this clumsy kid who causes nothing but trouble, suddenly anyone who knows anything about Greek mythology knows exactly where he gets it from.
Yeah.
As the
Also,
Brit in the room, yeah, we know exactly where America gets it from.
and also there is, there is the slight, not stated joke that could have, the slight implied joke of every Greek hero says Zeus is his father.
Yes, every Greek hero has a god for a father. If not
Yeah.
Zeus, then Apollo. If not Apollo, possibly Poseidon.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, Apollo turned out a few good ones. Poseidon did. I'm trying to think, and I've got too much alcohol in my brain to stop me thinking.
Yeah.
To let me think.
Perseus was Poseidon.
Yeah. So yeah. And again, a joke that's there for the first year classicists isn't stated outright, so doesn't alienate the audience who doesn't know those things, but is there.
Yeah.
In much the same way Disney does adult jokes in kids' movies for the adults without alienating the kids.
Yeah. And like, as much as we say that, Disney tried to make this movie palatable, to a Christian audience, Christians weren't happy about this movie. Or at least the funny Christians weren't.
Yeah, but they're never happy.
I mean, they were very happy with the Prince of Egypt teaser. Yeah.
I wasn't happy with the Prince of Egypt. But then I wasn't a funny Christian, so what do I know?
Yeah.
But yeah, this is how they work. Now, there's a few things I do want to point out. The characterization of the nymphs in this movie, spot on. Perfect, no notes.
Yeah.
Just had to point that out because I know I said we're not going to nitpick, but I have nitpicked a little bit. So just spot on, no notes.
Perfect. I mean, if you're going to nitpick the bad, might as well nitpick the good.
Yeah. What I do want to discuss, because we've talked about sort of this fame versus heroism in the American context. But fame versus heroism is something that does come up semi-routinely in ancient Greek myth. The concept of hubris, you all know the stories, folks. I ain't going to sit here repeating them. Hubris is always one that'll bring you down.
I was this close to making a Nat joke when Hercules first gets Pegasus.
Yeah. It's fame versus heroism. It's an important distinction, and it's an important distinction culturally for the ancient Greeks as well. Because the difference between a famous person and a hero is the difference between going into that river of the dead and going to the fields of Elysium, which are not shown in this movie, but are probably closer akin to how this movie portrays Olympus. We'll come back to how this movie portrays Olympus because I'm sure the former Christian has a lot to say about pearly gates and clouds, because I know I do. But yeah, that cultural differences are that's explored a lot in Greek culture. I would strongly recommend having a look at it. With regards to the presentation of Mount Olympus again, you know how I'm sure I said it about 3 times already, of this movie takes Greek things and gives it a Christian American veneer.
Yeah.
It's not what Mount Olympus is supposed to look like, folks. I get it. And from an authenticity point of view of this is the idea this is what we want to appeal to in an audience from 1997, spot on. Not how Olympus was described. I mean, not bad at all, but definitely very much playing up to the Christian worldview. And again, authentic for what they were aiming for, not necessarily accurate. And the reason I keep pointing these things out is because when I sit down next week and I start talking at you about authenticity versus accuracy, you're going to be thinking about all these things and it's going to click into place if it hasn't already. So just put a pin in them. Even like the way the gods are described. Depicted. Word. Depicted. They have light around them.
Yeah.
That's a halo, isn't it? That's basically a halo. Yeah, that's an ancient Greek Orthodox. That's like all Greek Orthodox halos, Catholic halos, Christian iconography.
Yeah.
How do you show that someone is divine in Christian iconography? You stick a light behind them.
Yep.
That's exactly what this movie does. And it's not even subtle.
When, Hercules goes through his apotheosis in the River of the Dead, he begins glowing.
Yeah. Because the glowing is that symbol. But again, he's doing his apotheosis. He then has his Greek terms, katabasis, I think, rising up. He has that.
And of course, I'm going to pull that pin out because, reaching deification by rescuing, someone from literally from the grips of Hades, from the underworld, from death, and sacrificing your life to do that. Very, very Jesus.
Yes, it's very Christian, isn't it? It's very the Messiah came to save from death. Like, I remember growing up in Catholic and being told Jesus saved you from death.
Yeah.
From eternal death.
And I'm not sure if this is just my specific Protestant, sect thing, because it may very well be, because it's not something that's explicitly stated in the Bible, but there are some interpretations that say for the 3 days while, Jesus was dead, he was actually in hell busting souls out.
I've heard that. I always assumed it was some kind of weird or myth story.
It is taken as doctrine in at least some charismatic sects.
We do need to sit down and discuss what is and isn't doctrine in different sects of Christianity, because that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So yeah. What was the point we were making? Alcohol. Any more alcohol? That's what I need.
The depiction of Hercules reaching his deification by literally diving into the river of death to rescue a lost soul is very, very Jesus.
Yeah, it is. It's very Jesus, it's very Christian. Obviously, Focus on the Family had an issue with the way the film ended, of him choosing the love of his life over deification and over quote unquote heaven, if you like. And I'm not being funny. If Focus on the Family, what was the line they gave? What was their what was it they said? If they can say that it might be confusing to young Christians to have to decide between heaven and the one they love, if they can see that that's quite obviously applicable to Christianity, us pointing out that this is Hercules through a Christian lens is not.
Yeah.
This is new. But how do I segue this?
Yeah.
How do I segue focus on the family and their particular views of women to Ovid and Meg? Yes.
Yeah. Our young viewers may further be confused by references to praying to the gods and Herc's longing to please the gods. Whether intentional or not, Disney reduces Christianity to the level of folklore by blending spiritual counterfeits with biblical orthodoxy.
They don't like it when the Greek sandal's on the other foot, do they?
Yeah.
Like, I have issues with the term spiritual counterfeits there.
Yeah.
But let's move on. You don't want to run on me from that. What I do want to talk about is,
but yeah,
damsel in distress.
Oh yeah, but the particular phrase we were looking for was a disquieting example for young Christians tempted to choose between holiness and hormones.
I take the hormones; they're more reliable. And Ring married me, so you all know what they picked. But yeah, so I want to talk about Meg because we've obviously done this thematically.
Yeah.
Look, if you didn't already know, and it's fine if you didn't, the ancient Greek myths are, to put it a little bit bluntly, but also quite gently, awash with heinous sexual assaults. I think that's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
But there is, and this film does touch on that, and it touches on that in a way that's really interesting, because I think it's the first time I've ever seen centaurs used for what centaurs were for in the mythology. Yes, thank you. And I actually like the way it's done. And I do think it's because, as much as Meg is the prisoner of Hades, has sold her soul. Like, even selling your soul is just a very Christian concept. Like, that's so weird to me.
Yeah,
and
you wouldn't sell seriously, your soul
why would deity. That's
like,
why would Hades want it anyway? She's already gonna die.
Yeah,
it's already his.
Yeah, it's all like he's already gonna get it.
Yeah, it's very weird. But this whole thing of, there's a line she delivers when she meets Hercules of, you know what men are like. No means yes, and get lost means take me, I'm yours.
Yeah.
And the way she acts that out and plays it along and makes it very clear that she's sneering those words.
Yeah.
That is by far, I think, the best way of explaining sexual assault to children I've ever seen. And it's not necessarily played for laughs. It is played straight. And that cultural thing of that goes back to Ovid. Like, Ovid post dates the Hercules myths, but it is Ovid. You know, in Ars Amortia, and I'm reading this bit, so if I stumble, this is why. No means yes. Women say no to sex only out of a sense of propriety or convention. Despite nominal resistance, they in fact find rape pleasurable. That's a direct quote from a website I found. Like that was, and Ovid the Arzamortia is like, that's the handbook of love and remained the handbook of love right through to the 20th century. Like, people still read that book to get tips on, like, pick-up tips. And bearing in mind that Ovid basically had beef with the emperor, so told all these young horny teenagers that the best pickup spots were right next to all the emperor's favorite statues, notwithstanding.
I mean, that does put a kind of a new light on the metamorphoses.
Yeah. Moving on.
Yeah, moving on. I like those moments. I like to wave at them as they pass by.
Yeah. So, and in Ovid, we get the example of Achilles. Now, I'm not going to read the extract. I copy and pasted it for myself. I'm going to tell you that story. Story goes, Achilles, through shenanigans, was basically dropped off by his mother in the court of a foreign king and had to pretend to be a girl to blend in. Shared rooms with the girls and assaulted the most fair of them. She then became his wife, his devoted wife, who presumably adored him. And in some versions of the mythos, she loved him so much she pretended to be a man so she could go off with him to Troy and fight.
Well, I mean, that's all kinds of yikesy.
Yeah, especially when you get there in Bridget's. Yeah. Just yikes. Just like ancient Greek myth is just very yikes. Leda and the Swan, famously Zeus, that was not consensual. Anything involving Zeus is not consensual.
Yeah.
Anything involving Apollo is not consensual. Neptune's less not consensual and more violent. Run, what are you doing? Run. Traumatic. The ancient Greeks did not have a concept as we do of what rape is. For us, rape is about the consent of the person involved.
Yeah.
The only person whose consent really mattered to the ancient Greek was the woman's father to make sure he got his dowry. To make sure the dowry was paid, etc.
Yeah.
See Hades and Persephone, which is the closest, like, again, she's taken against her will. Don't at me if you think she wasn't. She's taken against her will in the original mythos, and becomes his equal queen of the damned, because they didn't have a cultural understanding that that relationship was built on anything but rotten foundations.
Yeah.
For them, that was a perfectly acceptable relationship because the father had signed off on it. And it's a cultural difference. Now, Meg is, in this sense, as a character, very modern. Like, Meg is, she's her own woman. There's no father figure involved. There's no...
To once again make a Superman comparison, she is very much the worldly Lois Lane to Hercules is, farm straight boy. Off the farm, Clark Kent.
Yes, very much so. And this idea of a woman who is scheming, manipulative, lying, again, a cultural issue that goes back 5,500 years. But the reason I point it out is because I remember being a kid watching this movie. Disney are the only kids things I remember watching.
Yeah.
Like, as an adult, they're the only ones that really stuck. They were the big parts of my life. And I think Meg was the first Disney princess who, like, didn't just think for herself, because Ariel did that in The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
But Meg was the first Disney princess who dared to even insinuate, and actually said it outright, that women don't need a man.
And I mean, that's kind it, I mean it so it is kind of telling that she hasn't joined the pantheon of canon Disney princesses, but Mulan has.
Yeah. But Mulan's a completely different kettle of fish. I'm sure we'll get onto that at some point. But yeah, Meg is the greatest Disney princess that never was, because Meg taught the lesson of it's okay to be angry. It's okay not to want to be involved with men. It's okay to want to live your own life and have your own ideas and your own beliefs. It's okay to tell the god of death to go do one. It's also fundamentally what's so important about Meg is it's okay to change your mind and fall in love.
Yeah.
Because up until this point, Disney princesses are very stubborn, like problematically so, especially for their parents.
Cough, Jasmine,
but are also
cough.
Yes, but are also very set in their ways. Like, they make a decision in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and they never deviate from that opinion.
Yeah.
Like, can you think of a single Disney princess who makes it through the first third of her movie with a particular ending in mind, and that's not the ending she gets? Meg gets almost to the end before she finally admits she has to go through her own death and resurrection. She has to be quote unquote reborn.
Yeah.
To love. And if you wanted to take a Christian allegory of that, of, born in, you can do that. But I think it's so important, and I know it was important to me growing up. I was not one of those kids who, AFAB, who was all that interested in Disney princesses and growing up and getting married and all that.
Yeah.
That was not. Ring will tell you, I am not romantic.
Yeah.
I am not romantic. I'm sentimental. I'm not romantic.
Of the two of us, I'm probably the more romantic one.
Yeah, Ring's romantic. I'm sentimental. It works.
Yeah.
But Meg gave girls, and I was what, 5-year-old when I saw this movie, maybe 5-6-year-old by the time it hit VHS. Because it was on VHS. I remember it being on VHS.
Well, every. So yeah, you were probably about 5 or 6, because VHS release was usually about like a year after it left theater circulation.
Yeah, it's about 5 or 6 or 7 then, maybe. And Meg came along as a Disney princess at that time in my life where all the girls around me are starting to go boy crazy for the first time.
Yeah.
Teachers are asking boys, what do you want to be when you grow up, and asking girls, who do you want to marry when you grow up? Like, I remember that happening in a classroom I was in. Yeah. And my response was, I don't want to marry anyone. I want to go be, I was far too young to understand systematic sexism.
Yeah.
But I knew what I was seeing, and I knew there was a difference in that treatment. So it was really, Meg was the origin for me of that early 2000s, very innocent, borderline ignorant feminism that we all kind of dived onto if we were of that age group of, I'm not like other girls. I'm, and that was problematic in and of itself. But to get to where we are now, where we understand intersectional feminism, and we support our sisters regardless of, their genitals or anything else, and We understand how race intersects with gender and how, you know, nationality, class, all these other things intersect. We had to go through that phase of, I'm not like other girls, I'm basically a boy in a skirt. We had to go through that to get to here.
Yeah.
And we had to build on it. And for me, Meg is an important cultural aspect of that. Because Meg, for the first time, showed us that we were allowed to be angry at the world.
Yeah.
And at men. And we were allowed to look around and say, it's not fair that the boys are being asked if they want to be astronauts and we're being told we have to be princesses. Like, Meg gave us permission to be angry. Meg gave us permission to stand up and say, I'm a damsel in distress, but I got this.
Yeah.
And that's why I love this movie. The reason I love this movie is Meg. Well, Meg and the chorus. The chorus are amazing. I'll take no notes on the chorus. Love the chorus. But again, even that, for the first time in a piece of mainstream media, Black women were at the forefront doing what they do best, singing and presenting a story.
Yeah.
In a very, very Black way. And they weren't toned down for the white audience.
Yeah.
And for me, that's why this film was the intersect for me of, you're allowed to be angry, but you're also allowed to not be white. And those two things appearing in a Disney, I really need to hammer home how important that was. Because before this movie, all the Disney princesses were white, middle or upper class, girly, boy mad. They just were. And if they weren't, it's because the Disney movie was actually about the Disney prince and they were an add-on. And therefore there wasn't much you could grasp from it. And unfortunately, as much as we say, oh, you can imagine anything, you can be anything, the truth of the matter is, until you're shown it as a child, you don't understand that that's even possible. So seeing Meg stand up and say, no, I don't want a man, seeing these chorus women, the kind of women we saw, I saw at church, going to Black churches, taken seriously as musicians, being an integral part of the story. It mattered. This movie mattered as much to me as Black Panther mattered.
Yeah.
Because it showed me something different to what I was being told from every other angle. And that's what Disney grew into. And that's what Disney occasionally got brave and did in the Renaissance. Definitely did after the merger with Pixar.
Yeah.
And that's the flash of brilliance that makes this movie so special for me.
Yeah.
With regards to the rest of everything else we've talked about on this movie, it's within the Disney canon. It's a weird one. It doesn't quite fit anywhere.
Yeah.
It's an oddity. It's that, again, you can tell a lot about me by my favorite Disney movies. This, Robin Hood. I don't think I can come up with a third Disney movie that I'd call my favorite as an adult. No. Then it goes off into DreamWorks movies.
Yeah. Which, as we will explore when we get to it, and we touched on when we talked about The Road to El Dorado, is basically Disney perfected and subverted, or at least the early DreamWorks movies.
Exactly. And Robin Hood, a very weird Disney movie. In the canon of Disney. Like, very normal in some ways. It opened with a narrator, it had all these things. But it told the story of an outlaw, not a prince.
Yeah.
And, it told a folk tale and not a fairy story.
Yeah.
And in the same way, Hercules here is telling ancient Greek, not a Grimm. It's you've got this female character who doesn't really want to be there, which is new. She's not like Nala from last one, who was all over Simba, and like we had our discussion about that.
Yeah.
And whereas
like I said, the mid to late, like the Disney Renaissance is very much characterized by starting with a polished version of the basics and then expanding out into the new different types of stories that they could tell.
Yeah, definitely. And you can see because Hercules.
Yeah, Disney was a racist.
Oh yeah, Disney was absolutely racist. We're not saying he's not.
Yeah.
But again, the thing is, you can see with this this movie, it has its issues. All Disney movies have their issues. I'm sure we will look back on Encanto in 15 years' time and say, what? There'll be something wrong with it that we'll see in 15 years' time that we don't see now.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially since of like, between Pixar's Turning Red and Encanto, which are thematically very much nearly the same movie. Guess which one Focus on the Family liked a lot better?
I'm gonna say they preferred. Although they don't want to talk about periods, but they also don't want to talk about problems families, but the Madrigals are not white. Coin toss for me. I'm not sure I could.
They liked Encanto better than Turning Red.
Okay, so the right-wing white people's line is talking about natural bodily functions. They prefer to have non-white people.
Well, it was that plus the blatant Chinese mysticism, the Chinese mysticism when they're trying to undo the were panda is when the family's trying to hold the ceremony to undo the were pandaism.
This coming from fundamentalist Christians who like to exercise their children for having depression.
Yes. Also,
no comment.
I very much of the opinion that how the fundagelical right felt towards Disney in the late Renaissance is very much how the fundagelical right feels about Pixar ever since Coco.
I never saw Coco.
Yeah, because like clockwork, every time a new Pixar movie comes out, there's some kind of panic about how it's evil and demonic from the fundy right, and that started with Coco, which was a movie about the Day of the Dead.
Okay, I need the religious right to learn the difference between demonic and not white.
Yeah. No, do
it for me, please.
Like I'm very much sitting on the idea of a video about how, at least when it comes to the fundagelical right, demonic panics are very much just cultural supremacy dressed up in a funny suit.
Yeah. And again, cultural supremacy in a funny suit. If you want to talk about how this movie depicts ancient Greece, there's your headline, folks.
Yeah.
Cultural supremacy in a funny suit. I will also point out, we knew in the 90s that ancient Greek statues had been heavily painted and decorated.
Yeah.
Just saying.
So that being said,
authenticity over accuracy. It's aimed at the audience.
well, also everything, the statues being white, white marble led up to one of the best classical art jokes in the movie, where Hercules accidentally smashes the statue, and Meg says, "I actually like it better like that," and then it's the Venus de Milo.
Yeah. Definitely.
Consistently bitching about demon things in Disney was very much a late Renaissance thing. The religious right really loved the early Renaissance Disney. They're like classic Disney. There are only a couple classic Disney movies that were on that were on the banned list. Fantasia wasn't one of them because my dad liked it. And the other one was The Black Cauldron. Sword in the Stone was a gray area.
I'd have thought Sword in the Stone would be a definite no-no.
I think it was it was a very dark gray area, but it was a gray area because King Arthur. Because of course, the fundy is is more okay when with the magic English story when it's Anglo rather than Welsh.
I'd have thought their main problem would have been with the old guy in the purple sparkly dress who does magic.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, that was their problem with the early Harry Potter books.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is that it's easier to overlook the magical and supernatural elements of a English, mythological story when it's English and not, say Welsh, i.e. Sword in the Stone versus the Black Cauldron.
I can't say I ever saw the Black Cauldron, or if I did, I don't remember it.
Well, I haven't because it was, banned at my household, but I know it's based off a Welsh story.
That doesn't narrow it down. There's a lot of Welsh stories.
Yeah, it's it's basically based off Welsh mythology. So I'm like saying, once again, cultural supremacy in a funny hat.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. What I'm thinking we're doing, seeing as this is our last Disney episode, and we've got a few people in the chat.
Yeah.
If anyone's got any questions about any of the Disney movies we've talked about or anything like that, do drop them in and we'll have a chat.
Yeah.
Mainly to give me opportunity to sober up while Ring talks because I've drunk a lot of gin.
Yeah. and well, I don't know because we're on the topic of how fundies approach movies. Are you sure that you're not going to be drinking more?
It depends. We'll see. But yeah, like I do love this movie. It's a popcorn movie.
Like to elaborate on my response to Beige Grey Wolf, like the religious right. Okay, I'm going to say the mainstream religious fundy right. So your focus on the family fundy right.
Your Ken Hams and your
because as I said, they're like I'm aware of further extremes. Like I'm aware of no Narnia Christians. Like I've known no Narnia Christian households.
Do they understand that Narnia is a Christian allegory?
Like And like I said during the, while we were covering the Lion King, I know of Christian, I know of fundy households that drew the line at the Lion King. Like that considered the Lion King as no good.
Look, I know my parents were a bit weird about the stuff I watched. They let me watch really violent stuff, but anything that had anything romantic, they weren't keen on. I had a very weird childhood with the media I was allowed to see. But
Yeah, basically the no Narnia Christians care more about the aesthetics. Like it has, or rather, it has magic in it, so it's thus witchcraft and evil, and they don't really look into the fact that it is the most Christian allegory to Christian allegory since John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress.
Can I just do they really think you can feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish without a bit of magic?
Well, that's a miracle. There's a difference. It's a miracle if God or God's chosen people do it. It's evil witchcraft if anyone else does it.
We're talking about churches that speak in tongues and have visions. Like, you people don't get to talk to other people about what.
Yeah. We're talking about like to reference, my Secrets of Christian Sorcery video. We're talking about people who literally think that they are channeling the Spirit of God to shape the world in which they live.
Look, I'm an ex-Catholic. I was raised to believe that I literally, ritually cannibalized my God every Sunday. And even I think that's weird.
Yeah.
Okay, like, yeah.
But so once again, I'm talking about I'm talking about. I was friends with a girl in preschool who said that she was only allowed to see Robin Hood and apparently Song of the South.
That tells me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I though that being said, I'm surprised Dumbo isn't in that list.
Yes, but Dumbo has flying animals and that's magic.
I mean, arguably it's portrayed as his horrifically huge ears being able to act as wings. So
God doesn't make mistakes. There's no such thing as a birth defect.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's me taking the piss. Don't read into that.
But so talking, mainstream, like that girl you were friends with was probably in what I'd like to call a no Narnia household. But
not Mary Poppins, but Mary Pop Out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, there's a bunch of weird inconsistencies with how my media isolation was handled growing up. Like, for instance, Mary Poppins was a no-go, but I grew up, but I watched Aladdin growing up. And I think it's literally just because my mom liked Robin Williams.
There are worse reasons.
Yeah. But in terms of the mainstream fundagelical right, which I consider my upbringing to largely fall within, like classic Disney for the most part is considered good, moral, you know, at the absolute worst, harmless, unless you're talking about the Night on Bald. You know, there are some, you know, families that have issues with the Night on Bald Mountain sequence in Fantasia. And, you know, there are a movie, you know, there is a movie or two in the classic Disney era that's like, yeah, it's all good except for that. That's the one that you can't touch. When you get into the early Disney Renaissance, since the early Disney Renaissance is largely just the classic era but polished up, it once again it's very much you're good to go. It's good, clean family fun. You know, sit the kiddies down in front of it. Once you get to Pocahontas, that's where we have this mass exodus of the mainstream fundagelical right from being happy with Disney. Yeah. And in fact, the Southern Baptist and I'm going to be getting more into this on a video I'm making for this week, but the Southern Baptist Convention actually led a Disney boycott that lasted from 1997 all the way to 2005. So right when, or you know, the boycott started a couple of months after Hercules hit theaters. Now, you can't say that was the reason, because there were a bunch of reasons. In fact, you can't even really say the primary reason, because the American Family Association was pushing for the boycott for months. And that was because Disney extended the right to be on employees' health insurance to the partners of gay employees. Because, of course. And another contentious issue was Disney's acquisition of Miramax, the studio that brought us such films as Pulp Fiction. It was seen as antithetical to Disney's image as the family-friendly media company, but especially focused on the family, did lean into the most recent spat, your Pocahontas, Hunchback, Hercules movies as, being anti-Christian, to further justify them jumping in on the Southern Baptist Convention's boycott.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
I will say though, like, Pocahontas, Hercules, Hunchback. If you were going to cite 3 movies as a reason to boycott Disney, they ain't it.
Yeah.
Like, they ain't it. Like, Song of the South, Fantasia, but that's just because I don't like it. And yeah. I don't remember much of it from what I do remember. And like, I don't think there's any others that I have major beef with. See, this is the thing, like, because we grew up in that era where we were getting old enough to remember these things, as Pixar was claiming that cultural dominance from Disney.
Yeah.
Most Disney movies that I remember are very meh.
Yeah, like
I was a Toy Story child. Like, I was a Jessie girl. I was a Little Mermaid is probably the one that I remember. I'm told I was a big fan of Pocahontas, but that's probably because it was the first time I'd seen a Disney princess who wasn't fucking pearly white.
Like the only post-Renaissance Disney movie until the resurgence, starting with, Frozen, that made any kind of a cultural impact was Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah, Lilo and Stitch. But again, and it's that thing of Lilo and Stitch I remember watching, but I was a little bit too old for the target audience. Don't get me wrong, I loved it, still do. But I was a little bit too old for the target audience there. I think I was about 8 or 9. And there is this thing of Disney movies, especially when you have Pixar and DreamWorks. Like, I'm sure you will agree with me, Ring, when I say, although if you don't, by all means say so, we were spoiled rotten, media-wise.
Oh, yeah.
We were spoiled rotten. We had Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar. What else did
we had Fox, Blue Sky Studios.
Yeah, we had Warner Brothers, we had Cartoon Network.
We like, for those of you who do like the Despicable Me movies, there's Illumination. And of course, once every 4 years, Leica would come out with a new stop motion feature.
Yeah. Like here in Britain, we had, fucking hell, his name's gone out of my head. The cheese eating guy, Wallace and Gromit.
Yeah.
Stop motion. We had Art Attack and Pingu.
What's Aardman Entertainment, the Wallace and Gromit guys teamed up with DreamWorks to make Chicken Run.
Still a classic.
Yeah.
Absolute classic. Like, how do you explain The Great Escape to children? You make it chickens and it works.
Yeah, like one of these days we are going to cover Chicken Run when we can stop, when we can say the fact that Chicken Run is a Holocaust movie without laughing.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
It's not funny because when you watch the film through that prism of it's a Holocaust movie, it's horrifying.
Yeah, this is
awkward laughter. This is awkward, I feel uncomfortable laughter.
It is also kind of a funny statement in the absurd sense, but when you really think it through, it is kind of a horrifying truth that Chicken Run is a Holocaust movie.
Yeah, like it's very much an absurd. Yeah. Although technically The Great Escape wasn't the Holocaust because it was British.
Well, yeah, but when you
it was a Holocaust, definitely Holocaust adjacent.
Well, no,
but then when you add in the turning them to meat pies,
that's what makes it a Holocaust movie is profiting off the slaughter of an entire farm's worth of chickens.
Yeah. And ovens. Yeah. I'm not going there because that's
it's not that The Great Escape is a Holocaust movie. It's adding the chickens as the metaphor makes it a Holocaust movie.
I think adding the chicken factory makes it a Holocaust movie.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just the chickens, because it would just been chickens, fair enough, but bake them in a pie and put it. No.
Yeah, like adding.
Yeah.
So, but though I will say we were spoiled for choice, but I will also say that animation in the 2000s to 2010s did kind of fall into a hey, let's drag on Disney, reacting to Disney kind of rut.
Yeah, pretty much between, I would say, between The Emperor's New Groove and Shrek, there wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
Like, you had Atlantis came out. The Emperor's New Groove came out.
Yeah.
And then I don't really remember any big animation until Shrek.
Yeah. Well, and the 20,000s and the 2000s and 2010s was a basic sea of realistically styled, Pixar DreamWorks style computer animation.
Yeah. The problem is as well, kids media,
Yeah.
for better or for worse, was dominated in the 2000s by the channel punching bag.
Yeah.
Those movies started in 2001. Most people probably off the top of their head couldn't tell you what got the Oscar in 2001.
Yeah.
Because the only film you remember from that year is the first Harry Potter movie.
Actually, I do know a movie that got a Oscar from 2001.
Yes, but that's kind of, yeah.
Shrek got Best Animated Picture, and it was the first movie to get Best Animated Picture.
Yeah. So it was that, and I do think looking back on it, the reason the Harry Potter series was so successful at the time is because we've been through that dry spell of another Disney movie.
Yeah.
For a few years, and there was just nothing to really fill that gap. So yeah.
I mean, DreamWorks kind of filled that gap, but then Shrek came out and basically killed two-dimensional animation.
Okay. Nothing to fill that gap that wasn't religious propaganda.
I mean, they immediately undercut that though with The Road to El Dorado.
Colonialism, the animation.
Yeah. Which was then undercut by Spirit.
Cowboy movie told on the point of view of a horse. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you sort of saw what DreamWorks were doing, and they did grow into we're going to take a traditional story and undercut it.
Yeah.
And that will be what makes it fun and unique and ours. But there was a distinct lack of children's media in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Compared to the Disney Renaissance.
Yeah.
Renaissance.
Yeah,
my tongue's basically ignore me.
The 2000s and the 2000s up until Frozen came out is very much a period in animation that's characterized by being what Disney wasn't.
Yes.
And we basically got slapstick slightly satirical jabs at Disney in a semi-realistic computer animated style up until Spider-Verse.
Mm-hmm.
Where
I mean, we did get Lilo and Stitch, but even that wasn't traditional Disney, was it? That was again having a dig at, your Disney princess was actually a regular girl who was friends with aliens.
Yeah.
There was something, she was different. And I do think a lot of it is like before Pocahontas was the only. Before Mulan, there was Pocahontas. Mulan, even in the artwork, was drawn so white that she just didn't have the same appeal to non-white viewers as she perhaps should have done if they'd drawn her properly and coloured her properly. And then we didn't see anything until Lilo. Yeah, Lilo was the next one where we sort of looked and went, wait, she's not white.
Yeah. And then they tried again with, Tiana and Princess and the Frog. Which I'm surprised that my mom let my youngest sister watch.
To be fair, though, your mom had eased up a bit by the time.
Yeah.
It's one of those things because I think it is worth having talked about Disney and all their issues and everything else.
Yeah.
it's worth bearing in mind that, look, these are kids' films. 80%
Yeah.
of what kids pick up from these films, you can combat and you can discuss and can talk your way around and can explain, and can teach your kids not to internalize the more problematic elements of it.
Yeah.
They're not dead just because they're old and a little bit outdated now.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it was so important that we actually did this month, because there is this. I mean, we do classical media. We do classic media a lot,
Yeah.
but there is this. We have a cultural habit, unfortunately, of only giving a shit about the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's if you're lucky, if you're in the middle of an election cycle and you need to remember the last 6 months. The Anglosphere, I'm going to call it.
Oh yeah, you're picking up my terms.
Countries.
Weird
countries. Yeah. That's white. It's weird. White. Hang on. I need to get this acronym right.
Yeah.
Because basically, it's an acronym for, it's Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. Which is not any country, but it's supposed to be sort of Britain and America.
Yeah.
The culture has at best a 10-year memory.
Yeah.
Like if you try and get people to discuss anything that happened before Trump was elected nowadays, you're like, we have cultural amnesia. I think mainly because we've blocked it out because we don't want to think about how good we had it. But yeah, it's hard to go back. But I think it is important to go back once in a while for two reasons. One, because these things are the foundations upon which cultures are built.
Yeah.
What you show your children and what your children internalize is what they grow up saying and thinking. But also, it's really important sometimes to just look at how far we've come as a culture.
Yeah.
And to sit back and take a moment to decide whether that progress was A, good, B, more nuanced than that, and see if there even has been progress. Because for me, I know about you, for me, the jump from 2D to 3D,
yeah,
the only thing that changed was the aesthetic.
Yeah.
What is a bigger change in children's media for me is the growth of non-white stories being told, non-weird stories being told, the centering of non-white characters. And we've seen that across all media, and we've seen the fallout from that. But the thing is, we couldn't get to the point where now there's rumors of a black female. There was a black female James. We couldn't have had a black female James Bond in, if Disney hadn't made Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah.
There's a lot, if Black Panther hadn't been made, even potentially without Encanto, they're all part of the same story.
Yeah.
And there is this, we do have this tendency to split media off into little compartmented boxes.
Yeah.
Kids media goes there, like animation goes there, comic books go there, comic book movies go there. Let's put like the daytime TV there and the Christian movie. But the thing is, they all exist within a wider culture.
Yeah.
And so we pick one thing every week that we discuss. But there's a reason why every week we end up talking about other things as well.
Yeah.
It's because you can't discuss media in a vacuum, because media doesn't exist in a vacuum and neither does its audience.
Yeah, and especially this month was because we're talking about a period in the history of animation through the
Yeah.
lens of Disney, because up until 2019, like, the history of American animation up until 2019 is the history of Disney and reactions to Disney, at least cinematically.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
And
and
I've said it before and I'll say it again, 2019 with Into the Spider-Verse started a new era of cinematic animation, the first constructive era of cinematic animation that isn't being led by Disney.
and again, centers a non-white character, centers those narratives that we don't get, that we never saw in the 90s, in the early 2000s. And I do, just because I'm saying that as I'm reading your comment there, Mage
Yeah.
Grey Wolf, as you're concerned that the focus on non-white characters is being used as a sort of South Park style Operation Human Shield for poorly written stories. The thing is, that's also an important step in the development of non-white media. Non-white media is held to much higher standards than media that centers white people. And the thing is, the stories are not bad. They're just not what we're used to. And also, I think, why can't media about non-white people be bad?
Yeah.
Why is it not allowed to be bad? Like, we have dime a dozen stories about white people that are garbage, that you wouldn't spend 2 hours watching on a Sunday afternoon if your alternative was going to church.
Also,
But
I
they're allowed to be bad, and we have to get to a point where non-white media is allowed to be bad.
though
And so it
and
is feeding into that wider thing there.
I will say that the best, the best Predator movie, features an all like a native led cast, and I will fight anyone on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Prey is the best Predator movie that
I
I've
can't say
seen.
I've seen it, but I'll go with that. Yeah, if you
Yeah,
say
it's
so.
like it's like pretty much all the production was Comanche led. The most of the stars are Comanche. There is actually an alternate Comanche dub of it.
I
Yeah,
can't comment on it because I've not seen it, and honestly, my understanding of sort of Native American cultures and things is very, very limited. There's only so
yep,
much you can learn from outside of America.
yeah,
But the thing is, just because the stories are badly written doesn't mean they don't have some value somewhere. And personally, I don't think that the spate of stories we're seeing since Lilo and Stitch, really, let's be
yeah.
honest, since Lilo and Stitch, um, are that bad. Like Encanto, it's different. And the thing is, it has to be different when it's showcasing a culture that we're not used to seeing,
Yeah.
because that culture is different. Um, and I'm there's this same problem at the moment in LGBT media. LGBT media, every time a book or a movie or something comes out about a gay character, the first thing the critics jump on is it good representation?
Yeah.
Allow media that has gay characters, bi characters, trans characters to be more than reputation, more than representation.
Though,
It's allowed to say more than, look, we are LGBT and we are here.
Yeah.
Allow it to do that, and you will see the medium grow. And I think it's the problem is not necessarily that the films that we're talking about when we talk about Encanto or anything else, they're not necessarily bad.
Yeah.
You know, even Hamilton, it wasn't bad. It is just that it's held to this, that it has to be good in order to be accepted. And that's a problem.
Though that being said, there is a discussion to be had about diversity versus exoticism.
There is, and there's also a discussion to be had about the interplay of diversity and merit.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want any old black James Bond. We want a competent black James Bond. We want Idris Elba. We want a competent actor, or at least that as an idea, because that was an idea that was floated for a while.
Yeah, like for example, since we are talking about Disney, I'd say Aladdin is very much exoticism, but something like Lilo and Stitch is diverse.
Representation. But the thing is, it doesn't have to be representative or in order to be a good story. Yeah. And the thing is, if you are going for representation, you are going to fall into the trap of stereotypes. Stereotypes exist for a reason. And you know, a lot of people don't like that. But the truth of the matter is, the stereotype of the sassy black woman, Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the teenage mother trope, those stereotypes exist because they exist at the interplay between the reality of generations and generations of an inability and not being allowed to have the same opportunities as, say, white people, and then being demonized for it.
Yeah, something Jewish bankers, but they were the only people who could bank.
Yes. Oh, that was the only job they were allowed, and then suddenly, yeah. It's exactly the same thing. And the thing is, just because it's a stereotype doesn't mean it's not true to someone somewhere. It's like, I am stereotypically, there are certain aspects of my character that are very stereotypical. I'm not a stereotype, I'm a human being.
Yeah.
And it's handling those things sensitively, and I think the best way of handling them is to always have someone of the identity you're trying to portray involved in the creation and portrayal of that identity. It's not always necessary, it's not always possible, but when it is, I think it should be. And it is very much we've avoided talking about race while we've been doing these Disney movies. Largely because, again, the you know, Dumbo over there in the corner, Walt Disney was a racist.
Yeah.
And therefore anything that is spawned off his creative endeavors is going to have that undercurrent, whether we like it or not. But
yeah, something that, you know, something Rafiki.
Yeah. But I take great issue in anything being derided as stereotypical. Because especially by people who are not necessarily of the identity they're calling stereotypical. Let the people who are being represented make the decision of whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
And just as a personal anecdote, okay, I grew up Britain, 90s, mixed race. There's a particular term for mixed race people that is incredibly racist. I'm not even going to repeat it, it's so racist. And I have flat out really got into some fights and arguments with people over that term. I also use that term to refer to myself. I've reclaimed that term. I literally will have a go at someone for using that term in my presence, because that's not a term you use when you're not sure of your audience, and you know, when there's a when you haven't had that discussion with someone.
Yeah.
And there are certain stereotypes that come along with being mixed race, mixed up, confused, doesn't, you know. But the problem with stereotypes is they are inherently negative. That's what we mean when we say, yeah. That's what we mean when we say inherently negative. Like Natives' response out of Catholic and mixed race. Yes, now you understand. Now
Yes.
you get it. Yeah. But the people who those stereotypes are being applied to don't have to be perfect and the opposite of those stereotypes in order to disprove those stereotypes. Yes, I get confused sometimes. Yes, I was, you know, confused about my identity as a teenager. You would be too, with the amount of intersections I had. And that's okay. Yeah. That doesn't mean that any representation of a mixed race person who's confused is a stereotype. What it means is it's grappling with the very real issues that people like me deal with. If I wrote a story about a mixed race character, I would have that character grapple with these issues. And if someone came to me and said that's a stereotype or that's I would have a serious problem with that, because that's not a stereotype, that's my experience. Yeah. And the difference between a stereotype and real representation is who wrote it and what their intention was. But also, don't just, if I wrote a story and the character happened to be mixed race, don't then take that story and reduce it to nothing but mixed race representation, because that's not what the story is. And there is this balance to strike between being representative and allowing people to tell their stories that are representative more broadly of their ideas, and also not falling into the trap of only seeing them through the prism of representation. People are more than a particular aspect of their identity. And that's the end goal, I think. We need to get to a point where I can watch a movie with a black gay character, or, you know, a trans Native American character, or I'm literally just pulling identities out of thin air, you know. And say, yeah, that's a great film, it's a great story. And their identity informed the plot and informed what was going on in the movie, but didn't dictate it.
Yeah.
And for me, that's the difference. Like, identity shouldn't dictate it. And I have serious problems with anyone who says that, you know, you go back and watch the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air now, it's not woke. It's not woke. It's a black, they tick every box for black stereotypes in America. Every box. But I still love that show.
Yeah. Or
and I still have family who I look at. I still have family members who I look at and I think that's Uncle Phil. That's, you know, that's the oldest, I can't remember her name, the older sister who was like a fashion model or whatever.
You know, to quote a movie we covered in October, my boyfriend loves chick flicks.
Yeah, exactly. And that, like, that movie that we did in October, the character was gay and it did not matter. But when you watch it knowing that, it informs your viewing. And that for me is how it should be. That's the ideal. But unfortunately, we live in a world where you can't do that without causing a kerfuffle.
Yeah.
And
or
I'm going to say it as well. Do you know what I'm really sick of? I'm really sick of white people. And it is broadly white people, although occasionally other groups do it as well. Watching a film or a piece of media that's not made for them, that they are not the target audience for, expecting that should be aimed at them, and then slamming it because they don't understand it. It's like, it's not bad just because it's not got you at the center of it.
Oh, that really reminds me of my rant about Cinema Sins video on the Kingsman.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen Kingsman, so I don't know.
Yeah. I think in April we'll be doing the Kingsman, or at least the first Kingsman, and then the Knives Out movies.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, it's that line between, look, just before you go accusing it of being a stereotype, step back and look around at the people who are actually enjoying it.
Yeah.
Because, if it's a stereotype, what you're going to find is the people it supposedly represents don't like it.
Yeah.
You can tell that. And that's, Lilo was not I don't know any Hawaiians. Was Lilo a stereotype? I don't know.
You're asking me as if I know Hawaiians.
Yeah. To be fair, you're American, so of the two of us, you are more likely to know someone who's Hawaiian. But, I don't...
Yeah.
And this is the thing as well, like, I can speak to being mixed race and British. I can't speak to being Hawaiian or South American or Mexican. Or Mexico's in South America.
Well, actually, no, Mexico isn't. Mexico is part of the North American continent.
Yeah, but...
I mean, culturally, it is closer to South America because it was, colonized by Spain, as was most of South America, excepting Brazil, which was, colonized by Portugal. But
again, I can't speak to that because that's not my identity.
Or like
all I can say is,
in terms of turning red, like I can't, like I can speak to the experience of growing up in an overly controlled household. However, I cannot speak to the experience of growing up in a Chinese household or growing up AFAB.
And equally, I can't. And this is the thing. I think when you're watching media, if you come away from that piece of media with a view of a character as a character, they are not a stereotype. If you come away from a piece of media with a view of a people as a character, that's when there's a problem.
And I think that's a pretty good closing thought.
Yeah.
So, anything to shill?
Nothing to shill. Be here next week. Bring a pen and paper. You might want to take notes. I will be taking questions as we go through next week, so don't worry about it. Yeah. But no, nothing to shill.
Okay, so this Wednesday, because I've actually found a good editing release schedule that works for me. Hopefully, I'll have the audio. Oh, yes, important. Special thanks to Bemelzebub for fixing the audio issues in my response to Surus video. I re-uploaded the video with the fixed copy. So if you watch the bad copy, maybe give the better, give the fixed audio version a try. and I'm not specifically speaking to Mage Grey Wolf because I know that they watched it yesterday. So, like, anyone else who is watching this, maybe give it a view, help recover from the hiccup and algorithm bits. This Wednesday, hopefully, I'll have my OBS audio settings correct to where I'm not being muted out, but it's also not picking up my every breath. I'm going to be doing a kind of bow tie episode where I'm going to be talking about basically the fundagelical response to the late Disney Renaissance and how I hate how often my hunches are right, but my hunch about DreamWorks openly courting the fundagelical right for Prince of Egypt was kind of right.
I can see that.
And and of course, next week we are going to have our primer for Classical Reception Month, which I've seen we finalized the lineup, and it's going to be fun. If I remember right, it's first week is the primer, and then the week after that is War. We're going to be covering 300 in Troy, correct?
Yeah, let me have a look. Yes, so in the second week, so if you do want to get a head start because it's reading and watching, 300 the comic book, if you want to watch the movie just to get a gist, you can do that too. And Troy the movie, the 2004 movie starring Brad Pitt.
Yep.
They are popcorn movies. Fair warning, they are popcorn movies. Watch the primer before you watch Troy, because if you don't, it will make you angry otherwise. I am going to prime you to watch Troy in a way that won't make your head explode.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then
for that next week.
And then after that is, Who Weeps for Adonis, and I think Chirac. Yes. And then
we said we were going to do Who Weeps for Adonis first, so everyone had 2 weeks to read the comic book.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, primer, Who Weeps for Adonis, Greek Warfare Week, Chirac, ending with a classic Greek comedy brought bang up to date as it can be, as a Spike Lee movie. Is it Spike Lee?
Yeah, Spike Lee.
Yeah, Spike Lee. Yeah, so fun month next month. Lots of conversations to be had.
And then coming up in March is the Ring grab bag. I might have other things in the work, but nothing's confirmed. And with that, I think we'll go to last thing. So WotC caved on the OGL, which is good. However, I'm still iffy on whether or not when I stream gaming content, whether or not it'll be 5e, because I'm not sure how much I trust WotC.
Once bitten, twice shy, and all that.
Yeah. But they basically caved on the OGL, and not only that, released the 5th edition SRD into the Creative Commons. So 5e is safe forever. Like they put it to where they can't touch it because of how Creative Commons work.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a copyright lawyer. So
wait for Legal Eagle to do a follow-up video on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Legal Eagles original video was they can't they can't trademark or copyright game mechanics, but WotC was obviously going to just try and force their way with their army of lawyers and the community convention that they owned the mechanics of D&D. What they were doing was illegal and scummy, but they were doing it in a way that they would get away with it.
If they would have gotten away with it too.
Yeah, they would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for us meddling players.
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah,
I think there's
basically
really got a point there. Give it time.
Yeah, so good news is we won on the OGL. 5e is safe because it is in the Creative Commons, so they can't even appear to try and touch it. But once bitten, twice shy. If I given how heavily I homebrew stuff, if I stream something, it's probably not going to be in a D&D system.
So
and with that, we'll move to taglines.
Well, with that, as always, from me, take care, be good, and if you can't be good, use your noodle.
And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that. Come on.